Imagine reliving the day when the most powerful city in the world, where invincible legions marched down marble streets, emperors were worshipped as gods, and the Colosseum thundered with the roar of tens of thousands of spectators, was reduced to rubble, terror, and silence. But what looked like an instant collapse was actually the culmination of centuries of internal tensions, corruption that drained the public coffers, runaway inflation that ruined family finances, power struggles in the Senate that weakened central authority, and an inflated bureaucracy that could no longer hold the frontiers. Each barbarian sack, each desecrated temple, left deep scars not only in stone walls, but in Rome's very soul and the psyche of all Europe. In this video, we'll dissect the real process of the fall of the Roman Empire. You'll see how the barbarian invasions exploited our internal weaknesses, understand the psychological and political impact of the sack of Rome in 410, and discover the decisive role of Attila the Hun in spreading the fear that brought down the West. Prepare for a journey combining economic facts, political maneuvers, and epic battles, revealing why even the greatest empire of antiquity couldn't survive its own contradictions. But before we dive into these stories and curiosities of the Roman Empire, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit the bell. That way you won't miss any of our videos full of secrets and surprises about ancient Rome. As Rome crumbled from within, tribes labeled barbarians exploited every crack. Next, you'll see how that internal decay created the perfect stage for foreign armies to seize control, and why not even the legendary legions could hold back the tide. The empire cracked from within. In the 3rd century AD, Rome presented a shocking contrast. On one side, marble palaces and temples, on the other, slums and abandoned farms. Small landowners, crushed by rising taxes and debts incurred to maintain. Slaves abandoned their fields and moved to the cities or became clients of powerful latifundia owners. The result? Vast estates and a voiceless mass of former peasants. Inside the Senate, senators and magistrates grew rich on public contracts and extortion, while ordinary citizens watched their denarius lose value day by day. The Pax Romana became a legend. Inflation ate away at wages, and bronze and silver coins were replaced by ever cheaper alloys. On the frontiers, once guarded by disciplined legions, underpaid soldiers sold their services to the highest bidder, lost cohesion, and abandoned their posts. This economic and social instability created a void of authority. Elites pursued private interests, the bureaucracy swelled without efficiency, and the army, undisciplined, turned into bands of mercenaries. When basic needs, food, security, justice, clashed with aristocratic privileges, Rome ceased to be a unified empire and became a mosaic of powerful rival factions. The architectural splendor still awed travelers, but beneath the surface reigned distrust. Who would protect a people who no longer trusted their leaders? And if the internal walls collapsed, how much external force would it take to topple the giant? Get ready. In the next session, we'll meet the peoples who seized these vicious to invade the heart of Rome. Crisis and anarchy. The machine collapses. As Rome stretched its rule across 3 continents, administering such diversity became a bureaucratic nightmare. The agricultural base, sustained by slave labor, collapsed when vast estates swallowed small farms. Peasants, unable to pay taxes, turned to powerful lords for protection, trading citizenship for security. A prototype feudalism emerged. Land concentrated in few hands, population dependent on local privileges, and clientelist ties that eroded Roman identity. On the military front, the chaos was even more dramatic. Between 235 and 284 AD, called the Military Anarchy, over 20 emperors seized the throne in successive coups. Each usurper recruited private armies, often composed of barbarian mercenaries lured by promises of pay and land. These troops felt no pride in Rome. Their loyalty lay with the leader who paid their wages. The legendary legions, once models of discipline and cohesion, fragmented into rival bands ready to sell their swords to the highest bidder. The result was devastating. Entire regions suffered famine and pillage. Independent garrisons launched offensives against neighboring cities to supply their own provisions. Gladiator uprisings and soldier mutinies became routine. The weakened central authority could no longer pursue a common project. The empire ceased to be a unified organism and became a board of warring factions. Inviting barbarian mercenaries was a short-term fix. That became a trap. Yesterday's allies turned into today's invaders because they knew every weakness of Roman defenses. If even loyal legions could not hold, how could the frontiers stop outsiders? Stay tuned. In the next session, we'll see Diocletian's drastic maneuver and its consequences for the West. Fatal division, Diocletian's solution in 285 AD. Emperor Diocletian faced an empire exhausted by internal wars, fiscal crises, and frontier pressures. To regain control, he established the Tetrarchy. 2 Augusti and 2 Caesars would share power, dividing the territory into the Eastern and Western Empire. The idea was to speed up decisions and strengthen defense, but in the end, it deepened the imbalance between the halves. The East, with prosperous centers like Alexandria and the new Constantinople, maintained trade and abundant resources. The West, more rural and dispersed, sank into debt. Taxes rose, agricultural production plummeted, and Ravenna, chosen as capital for its defensible position, never offered Rome's political prestige. 2 imperial courts also meant 2 distinct bureaucracies, 2 currencies, and competing priorities. While Constantine rebuilt walls and temples in the east, the west saw its legions dwindle, without funds, without supplies, and without morale. The populace, tired of unfulfilled promises, began to doubt the capacity of a fragmented government. Instead of uniting forces, each tetrarch tended to his own corner, opening a strategic gap. Barbarian tribes that once negotiated trade and treaties now saw 2 weak targets instead of 1. Diocletian's administrative solution proved a trap. Divide to rule became an invitation to invade. When a castle splits, it takes only a bold enemy to seize each tower. But who were these peoples living beyond Rome's frontiers? Who were the real barbarians? In Roman vocabulary, a barbarian was anyone who didn't speak Latin or Greek, a pejorative label masking immense cultural diversity. These savage tribes were actually a complex tapestry of nations. Visigoths, Western Goths. From the Black Sea region, many served as Foederati in the Roman army and adopted Arian Christianity. They were Romans by choice, then by revolt, blending Germanic tactics with Roman discipline. Ostrogoths, Eastern Goths, skilled steppe horsemen with strong tribal leadership and nomadic traditions. Their mobility and mounted archery terrorized. Heavy legions, Vandals, from Central Europe, masters of the sea with agile fleets. After crossing into Africa, they made Carthage their power base and sacked Rome in 455, carrying off priceless art and treasure. Franks, originally farmer warriors in Gaul, they fused Germanic customs with Roman institutions, laying the foundations for the future Kingdom of France. Saxons. From northern Germany, they migrated to Britain and founded kingdoms that became Anglo-Saxon England. Huns, nomads from the Central Asian steppes, unified by Attila. Mounted on swift horses and armed with composite bows, they used guerrilla tactics that destabilized both Romans and other barbarian tribes. These peoples were not amorphous bands of looters, but societies with laws, crafts, and hierarchies. Climate shifts, population pressures, and above all, the lure of Roman wealth drove their migrations. For many, crossing the limes meant seeking fertile land, riches, and political alliances. When coexistence relied on unkept promises, land. For military service, empty titles, and delayed pay, the tension exploded. The alliance that seemed to strengthen Rome became its greatest threat. See how in an instant yesterday's allies turned into merciless enemies. Broken alliances. The Foederati revolt in the western provinces, Rome's ancient stone wall, became the setting for a tense coexistence. Barbarians, Visigoths, Vandals, and other Foederati were settled on Roman land, granted plots and pay to guard frontiers once held by citizen legions. Side by side with exhausted centurions, these allies trained in makeshift camps, blending Germanic and Roman tactics. But the apparent partnership hid deep fractures. Corrupt officers withheld pay, delayed provisions, and imposed humiliating rules. On the barbarians, loyalty, bought with gold, turned to resentment. When shortages hit, camped families starved while Roman commanders feasted in Ravenna. The spark came on August 9th, 378 AD, at the Battle of Adrianople. Emperor Valens, confident in the support of Gothic recruits, underestimated the tribal unity forged by suffering. Upon learning of mistreatment of Gothic women and children, the mercenaries rebelled. In a ferocious attack, they ambushed the Roman cavalry in a valley, annihilating entire units. Valens was found dead among the camp's wreckage. The tragedy of Adrianople exposed Rome's greatest mistake, believing it could tame foreigners without granting them rights. By incorporating the other without respect, it lost its own military soul. The frontier ceased to be a line of defense and became a wide-open gate for future invasions. Wonder how Adrianople reshaped Rome's power and paved the way for new barbarian conquests. Leave a like and help us bring more chapters of this epic story. If Adrianople was the alarm bell, no name inspired as much terror as Attila the Hun. Stay tuned for the next showdown. Attila, the Scourge of God. When Attila united the Hunnic tribes in 434 AD, he emerged not as a mere raider, but as an unstoppable force bent on reshaping Europe. Mounted on swift, light horses, his archers wielded composite bows for long range fire, employing guerrilla tactics, lightning ambushes, strategic feigned retreats, and surprise strikes. Provinces along the Danube collapsed. Entire villages fled at the thunder of hooves and black arrows blotting the sky. In 451, Attila moved into Gaul. There, on a plain later called the Catalonian Fields, he met a coalition of Romans and Visigoths determined to stop him. The battle was brutal. Shattered shields, broken spears, piled corpses. Despite heavy losses on both sides, Attila realized his cavalry could not secure victory in that terrain. He chose to withdraw, taking with him the terror he had unleashed, a stalemate that cemented his legend as the Scourge of God. The following year, 452, he marched on Italy. Rome, already weakened, braced for disaster. Then something extraordinary happened. Pope Leo I, unarmed, went out to meet Attila dressed in white robes and holding only a cross. Witnesses speak of a silent exchange and a presence so commanding it gave the Hun pause. Whatever words passed, promise. Of gold, divine fear, or respect for faith. The fact is, Attila ordered a retreat, sparing Rome a seemingly inevitable sack. This diplomatic encounter entered legend. A cleric facing the greatest warrior of his age and prevailing without a sword. Rome survived a few more years, but the Hun terror had laid bare its vulnerability. Rome sighed relief, but the storm was far from over. Next came the sack of 410, and with it, the realization that nothing would ever be the same. The first sack of Rome, 410 AD on August 24th, 410. For the first time in nearly 800 years, Rome's bells tolled not for ceremony, but for terror. Alaric, king of the Visigoths and former Roman legion commander, felt betrayed by the Senate's rejection of his demands for land and respect. At the head of some 30,000 battle-hardened warriors, he laid siege to the city. Rome's defenses, weakened by recruitment crises and administrative division, offered little resistance. For 3 days, the Goths exploited every gate. Troops streamed through the Forum, toppled imperial statues, and emptied temple treasuries. Though Alaric ordered churches spared and civilians largely unharmed, the psychological shock was immense. Romans, seeing sacred marble scarred by weapons, knew the myth of invincibility had died. Libraries lost manuscripts and families sheltering. In basilicas, watched helplessly as their history was looted. For Rome, the sack of 410 was more than violence. It was proof that the Western Empire no longer wielded the power that had sustained its prestige for centuries. Provinces, hearing of the fall, stopped appealing to the Senate and began forging their own centers of power, whether in Ravenna or regional cities. The dream of restoring imperial grandeur faded, replaced by the reality of emerging barbarian kingdoms. If Alaric proved Rome could fall, in 455 a new sack would show that nothing was safe. Get ready for the Vandals' meticulous assault. The Vandals in Rome, the final blow in 455, Rome's fury met a new protagonist, Genseric, king of the Vandals. Exploiting the West's weakness, he assembled a fleet of over 100 ships and crossed the Mediterranean to Italy. Unlike the Gothic sack of 410, this was a surgical operation. In 3 days, the Vandals looted palaces and temples, loading priceless artwork, precious metals, and high-status prisoners onto ships bound for Carthage. Docks teemed with vessels overflowing with gold statues and ancient manuscripts, time capsules carrying away a dying empire's cultural treasure. Genseric sought not mindless destruction, but reparation. His Foederati in Rome had never received promised land or pay. By sparing churches, he showed a form of barbarian courtesy, but he humiliated the Roman elite by confiscating property and stripping senators of their symbols of authority. Rome was no longer an unconquerable capital, but an empty relic, ripe for plunder with little resistance. The sack of 455 sealed the Western collapse. With Rome stripped bare, ancient institutions lost prestige. Elites fled to Ravenna or sought refuge in Constantinople. The West fractured into Germanic kingdoms, each claiming fragments of Rome's legacy. The term vandalism was born from this event, forever linking Genseric's name to calculated destruction. Looted and humiliated, the Romans still witnessed the final act, the official fall of the Western throne. Meet Romulus Augustulus and Odoacer, the actors in the end of an era. 476, the last emperor falls in. 475, the Western imperial title fell to a youth of about 15, Romulus Augustulus. His name was ironic. Romulus, after Rome's legendary founder. Augustulus, a diminutive of Augustus. But his power was nil. Without a loyal army or political support, he was a figurehead of a system that no longer worked. In the provinces, Germanic Foederati chiefs commanded entire legions. Odoacer, one such general, led troops loyal to him, not the emperor. In September 476, unopposed, he marched on Ravenna and deposed Romulus. In a gesture laden with meaning, he sent the imperial insignia to the Eastern Emperor in Constantinople, declaring the Western throne unnecessary. No successor was crowned. The office simply ceased to exist. Romulus was spared and exiled to a villa in Campania, while the Roman Senate weakened, dissolved into local feuds. The authority once emanating from the Forum became a mere symbol. Centuries-old institutions lost real power. Odoacer's act was more than usurpation. It was an acknowledgement that the Western imperial model had no future. This final act concluded centuries of crisis, economic, political, and military. the empire that had endured plagues, civil wars, and succession struggles yielded to those once called barbarians. By proclaiming himself King of Italy, Odoacer inaugurated the Western Middle Ages, redrawing borders and power. Rome lost its throne, but not its soul. In the nation's rising, from the ashes, the Roman legacy would sprout in surprising ways. Rome lives, the legacy. After the fall, the deposition of Romulus Augustulus in 476 marked the official end of the Western Roman Empire, but not the disappearance of its achievements. Rome's institutions continued to pulse under new banners. Roman laws, codified in the Corpus Juris Civilis, were adapted by Germanic kings and formed the basis for future European legal systems. The roads connecting provinces facilitated trade among medieval realms, and aqueducts inspired water supply solutions in emerging cities. Engineering techniques, from the arch to the vault, were reused in cathedrals and castles. In barbarian kingdoms, former senators and new Germanic monarchs forged a cultural synthesis. Bishops, heirs to public prestige, wove Roman law into Christian doctrine, creating a legal code uniting faith and law. Monasteries emerged as guardians of ancient libraries, preserving manuscripts of Virgil, Cicero, and early Christian writers. Medieval towns rose on forum and temple ruins, reusing columns and stones for walls and plazas. Vulgar Latin, spoken by rural populations, gradually evolved into the Romance languages: Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, and Romanian. Each word carried echoes of the Senate and the poets, keeping Rome's voice alive. The Church, direct heir to the imperial apparatus, became the leading educational and social institution, channeling resources into charity and building cathedrals, blending Roman and Gothic styles. Today, strolling through Rome, Paris, or Lisbon, we breathe a legacy that transcends ruins. The fall of the Roman Empire was not a full stop, but a comma, a turning point that allowed new nations to flourish. The barbarian invasions and the sack of Rome were transformations that redrew the map, and figures like Attila the Hun remind us that sometimes destruction also sows the seeds of the future. If you enjoyed this time travel and want more fascinating stories, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with your friends. That helps us keep bringing quality historical content. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video on ancient Rome and its grand empire.